So this is a sort of slightly lower tech element of the conference. It's a panel, so there'll be no slides, just a piece of paper with the title of the panel and my phone for my notes. So on the program, you'll see that the title is "What is our end goal and how do we get there?" which is a bit philosophical, but you wanted to give a scope for having questions of any type related to the conference. So let me start by introducing the panel members. So going in order to my right, I'll do the reverse. So we have Mona Dash, who's the head of AI and automation at Infosys, and she's spent last 8 years looking at AI and automation solutions for Infosys clients. Next is Martin. Martin is the CEO of ICS.ai, which is a leading AI solutions provider in the public sector. Then we have Nimi Patel, who's the head of skills, talent, and diversity at Tech UK. So she looks at everything to do with education, diversity, and the future of work policy. And then last but not least is David Hayes, who's the Chief Data Officer at the Open University. So he has a very small job of getting all our data in line and making it ready for the AI. So, so this is going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So you have to do some work to use the calories that you just ate at lunch. But just to give you time to warm up, I'll ask a first question, which is, and this is not directed to any specific panel member, so you can volunteer to answer or not answer, as you wish. So the question is, how would you describe a good place from your own personal organizational viewpoint for us to be in, I'll make it easy, 5 years' time? Does anybody want to have a first go at that?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
So I work for Tech UK, which is a tech trade association with around 1,000 tech businesses in our ecosystem, of which one of them is Infosys. And you saw Jacqueline de Rojas earlier this morning providing the keynote. She is one of the former presidents of Tech UK. And our mission statement is to really ensure that the tech sector, especially the UK tech sector, is reflective of the society it seeks to serve, so that products and services can be better. And I think even though we might not be able to achieve that goal in 5 years, I think we're working towards making sure that AI works for everyone, as we've heard quite a lot today, but also the steps that we need to take that to get there, as you mentioned, in a perfect world, would be for businesses, universities, academia, and wider stakeholders such as government to come together to actually put money behind the problem.
Great answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll go.
Martin.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I've got new direction, thanks to that fantastic statement of making AI work for the 8 billion and not 8 billionaires. I think that just really succinctly puts the challenge. From our perspective, the opportunity is to get AI adopted at pace. And the greatest challenge is doing that with continual waves of technology coming along, and it makes it easy for people to just hold back. So I think, from our perspective, looking back in 5 years, it's really being proud of what we managed to achieve in driving adoption, particularly in the education sector, so that it's really reached its potential. Bit cheesy, but there we go.
Cheesy is good. Cheesy works. Anybody else?
Shall I go
next?
Yes. So I'm obviously from Infosys, and for those who don't know Infosys, we are a global systems integrator. So we do consulting, IT services across different technologies, and our mission is therefore to help our customers kind of achieve where they want to be. And in this special instance, it's obviously about AI, which I'm talking about. So the way within Infosys itself, we have a vision of being AI first. And what we mean by that is seeing that AI is embedded throughout the organization and, kind of in the people and the processes. So it's not about being in silos and, just having like data scientists sitting in a corner making some tools, but actually sort of seeing that it is embedded across the organization. And the way we have envisioned this is to see how AI comes in through, in kind of workplace and at the actual workforce as well. So in the work point of view, we are looking at, how our developers, for example, are using tools like code assistants or sort of GitHub, Narrow Transformers, which is one of our solutions, to actually develop code for our customers and, kind of shortening the cycle of migration programs and all. Then in the workplace scenario, we are seeing that how do our employees have knowledge assistant tools or using queries to do self-service or HR query HR policies and things. And lastly, of course, to upskill our own workers. So we have a whole program of being AI aware or AI builders and AI masters. And I know we had some of those terms talked about in the morning as well. So that's how we see ourselves and kind of taking this. But what do we want for our customers is we again look at customers across 4 different areas. So we have customers who we say as the AI experimenters and, being kind of AI aware, I think is the first one. So they know what AI is and great, cool tool, let's see what we'll do with it. The second stage, of course, is the experimenters who've done a couple of POCs and then they're kind of thinking, how do we productionize it? Or the next stage is when you operationalize AI. So some use cases are productionized. And I think we've said like almost 70% of organizations, which we did a survey recently through Infosys Knowledge Institute, found almost 72% or so actually have at least one Gen AI use case in production. And the last stage we see enterprises is to being AI first, which is what I just described across peoples and processes. So that's what we would want everybody to be in the next 5 years. And of course, all of this is about responsible AI because we take this very, with the power generative AI can bring. I think we all know that responsible AI, ethical AI, and using AI in a explainable manner, that should be literally core to all of this. And I'll just end with a disclaimer saying that obviously if you look at 5 years ahead and you have to see 5 years behind, what happened in the last 5 years, and that's 2 big things, right? One was the pandemic, which literally forced all organizations to rethink their digital transformation stories. And, overnight everybody had to get used to a hybrid way of working or else people lost, businesses went out. And obviously the second one is GPT and ChatGPT, November 2020, 2 years back. So I think, so we probably can't predict what will happen in the 5 years, but that's what we'd like to be. Sorry, it's a very long answer.
No, it's fine. It's
yeah.
good. So, David.
Just to follow up on that, then, so I guess I'd like to start by saying working for the AU is a real privilege. It's a privilege to work in an organisation where we try and provide education for people who otherwise may not be able to get to that education. For me, I'd like to simplify where we've got to in 5 years' time into 5 years from now. I'd like to be able to say that I can demonstrate, or we can demonstrate, we've used AI to help more people get more of that education than they otherwise would be able to get from society. And if I could add one more to that, I'd like to be able to do that, but also be able to do that by demonstrating we've done that really, really efficiently. So we can do that at scale. So I think AI gives us a chance to do more of that great purposeful thing that we do in the OU at more scale than we do today. I'd love to be able to demonstrate that.
Great. So, yes. Do we have a microphone, please, to the front? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be able to have a conversation as well as learn from experts. Thank you so much. So my question is, based on a lot of the presentations we had today and also my own experience, the jobs of the future, both the jobs of the future and also our ability to really engineer AI solutions that serve people requires human intelligence to be developed, soft skills to be developed, cognizant capabilities to really come to the fore, team working, diversity, the ability to disagree constructively. All of those things are best done in person. So how do we actually reconcile the tension of working patterns which have got a very significant component of remote working with the greater emphasis on those personal interactions to enable both outstanding service design plus also skills development, particularly where the skills of the future are those human aspects of us?
Great
Sorry,
question.
it's a big question, but...
No, it's great question. So I have an answer. I'm the chair, so I'm not supposed to answer. But does anyone? I can have a go. Does anyone have a go?
Go for it.
Yeah, hey, take it.
You have a.
Take it.
Okay, so I'll do it while you do it. So, typical academic is you get a tough question and you rephrase it to a question you can answer. So, actually, what I was thinking of was the flipped classroom. So, if people know this, so the flipped classroom is you don't bring students into a big lecture hall like this. This part might be online, but instead you have small groups, and those small groups in person. You can do the things you can do. So what you would do in a big classroom like this, you would do online, like in a YouTube style. And I was thinking maybe we need the equivalent of the flipped classroom, but for work. So the things that you can do that don't require those skills, those important skills, you would do maybe from home, or you would do with an AI or an AI assistant. But especially for junior colleagues, you would get enhanced tuition and connections in an environment. So maybe, I remember when some people come to the lab, you see that some people that work at home a lot, they just come and want to talk to everyone. They want to come and have coffee with everyone. And, people can laugh at them and say, but in a sense, that's what they should do. So maybe you should go to work to just go and hang out with your colleagues and practice, the social element. And then the other work, it's not real work, the other work you do at home remotely. So it's something like that that is this restructuring because we live in a Gen AI world. Okay.
So I think that was a real issue after the pandemic, especially when young people going into the workplace, because there often weren't senior leaders there who were working remotely who found it obviously more beneficial to their work-life balance. What we found within our organization and within tech businesses that have really good retainment stats and who retain a lot of their staff is that they lead by example based on their company culture. So in some ways, what John mentioned works for one company, but for another, they will mandate, people come in 2 days a week, and we will do, seminar sessions, or we'll have a scrum and do some teamwork then. But what's also important is to treat people like adults, but as long as you lead by example, that's been really crucial. I'd be remiss as someone who works in the tech sector not to talk about the really great collaborative tools that are out there. I mean, Microsoft and Zoom have done great, but like you said, it won't replace the kind of in-person human contact that you need to have. And so packing your day with the lunches, with the dinners, with bringing everyone together can be really useful.
I think it is a really good question because it's something that touches everywhere, which is the extent to which people have become engaged with their technology, particularly the younger adults. If I look at my family, it's gadget, gadget, gadget. From an employer's perspective, we quickly went from a model where we're almost entirely in the workplace to one where we are now entirely outside of it. We employ right across the country. So we're no longer in a position where we can mandate, in fact, that people come to the office. So what we've started to do is to essentially engineer collaborative time into everything that we do. So, when we start a new project, then we will go to a venue and we will ensure that our people are engaged face to face. There's a number of tactics that we're undertaking. And I think the challenge with AI is that takes that disengagement another level, which makes it all the more important that that human side of it people really think about. It's super important.
I think I've always been guilty of being way more than glass half full with things, so please forgive me for that. But for me, I'm seeing benefits already of bringing AI to remote meetings, and you can bring AI into a room if you do it very purposefully. So I guess we've all had the experience of being in a hybrid meeting which doesn't work. No. People on a screen or on a phone, not really engaged in a room. But we've probably all now had experiences of hybrid meetings which are made to work, where people make a real effort to bring people who are not in the room into the room and make sure everybody speaks. And I think you can do that. And I guess it's not, the optimist in me says there isn't one answer. There are certain things that work better for certain tasks and certain things that work better for other tasks. I think we probably know that historically anyway. And sometimes you don't need to be in a room together to work effectively, and sometimes you do. That flexibility in the future work feels like that's an all right model. And it's just working with that, I think.
Yeah, I guess what companies and universities will need to do is invest in that AI tech and support the upskilling of their staff to actually leverage that tech. Because often, how many times have we all been in a room going, oh, that does something really cool, but I don't know how it works.
The 5-minute gap at the start of the meeting
Yeah.
before it starts.
Nothing works.
Yeah. Any more answers? Otherwise, okay, another question. If you can get a microphone to the second row.
I hope I am audible. So this question, so I'm from Infosys, okay, so I definitely like Gen AI and everything, but this question is not about, saying that what it brings to the table and all, but I'm just reflecting on myself, and like, as many of us are reflecting, is that once AI has come, Gen AI has come in and everything has come in, everywhere somebody is assisting you, okay? This assistant, that assistant, and everything, and when you want to write some mail, somebody is assisting you. When you want to do anything, somebody is assisting you. Sometimes I feel, is it good or bad? Because I somehow feel that I lost my thinking. For anything and everything, right? There is somebody else who will help me, right? So, is it good for my brain or not? I don't know. Sometimes that's what is going on. The question is that, how do I stay relevant in the context of someone told me today morning that AI probably is in the name of digital species. How do I make sure that I stay relevant in this digital species world? Not to get accommodated myself too much into it and then, not able to come out. Sorry, it's a long question. So.
Yeah, I think I'm also something of an optimist in this, and I think there's a temptation to think of the work opportunity as a pie that gets sliced up, and to view it that, okay, AI is now doing that slice, and therefore I'm not. And I know this is not entirely what your question was about. I tend to view it differently from what I'm seeing with our customers. Certainly from my personal experience, is that I think what AI certainly does for us, is it just massively accelerates what is possible. So the productivity improvements are just through the roof. So rather than me being in a situation where, I'm probably one of the most prolific users of AI in our organisation, and quite a lot of what I do is product and proposition design. I'm on some of the patents, and so I spend my time working with AI, designing products, and the rate at which these things can do. And my thinking is even more, because I'm getting my answers quickly, and I'm on to the next thing, So it's, I think what we will see from it is just a huge productivity explosion, because that expert capability is now available to everyone. And you're able to use it, and you can use it quickly, and you can use it productively. And I think it raises a really interesting question in the context of education. So, okay, well, what exactly does that mean in the education sector? Does that mean I can now do my 2-year degree in 2 months? No, that's not what's going to end up happening. Yeah. But, what will almost certainly happen is that people after their 2 years will be leaving doing much, much more than they would have done, joining the workforce much more capable.
I think maybe 2 things I'd say. One, you've got to be curious. Everybody, now is the right time to be really curious about what it is, because I don't think anybody can really answer the question, what does it mean for us yet, because it's information. And 2, it probably means that the human in you, what you bring to what you do, is going to become even more important. Mm-hmm. Right? You're going to bring much more humanity to the things that you can do, and take a lot of the drudgery out of what you might have to do today, what we all have to do today, in the same way that we take for granted that we use sat-nav to get us to places now. We used to use paper maps that used to go out of date, and then we used to just use our memory before all of that. No one worries about the fact that you're using a sat-nav now, and no one complains that you don't go back to a paper map. It's not made that bit irrelevant, right? And I know it's much more abundant than that, and that's just a simple example, but I think you by staying curious and staying human, you're doing something that the AI can't do. Let it do the things that you really struggle to do, and go with that. See where it takes you.
I really like that example, because my example is going to be Excel, because when you have to do the sums and the macros, and no one complained about that. But I think it comes back to what Professor Rose was talking about this morning, the fact that we might sometimes switch off our brains when we use AI, but what will be really important is AI literacy and comprehension. And talking about kind of what happens next in terms of new technologies, I mean, things always flow, right? They have a half-life. Remember when we were all supposed to be working in the metaverse and we're not yet, and we're not learning in that either. So yeah, things ebb and flow, but like Dave said, focusing on the curiosity.
I mean, just to add, even though I'm from Infosys as well, but I think it's really important to see where we are using it, because there's just so much made out of, as you said, assistance. And I always find, people are really excited when Copilot drafts an email for them. And I'm like, seriously, I think we need to be very clever about, do we really want to draft a very personal email to somebody? Can we not do that ourselves? Or do we actually want it to maybe query? I mean, I would love it, for example, if the assistant actually queried through all the vast emails I get every day and actually help me prioritize which one is the, could be the most burning one, and not just by the, by the from or the most recent. So I think we have to be clever about what use cases we are using it for, and not make sure that it's, I think we had that in the term in the morning as well. We should be calling it accelerated intelligence. It's like it should help intelligence and not take it away.
Yeah, I leverage it to do things I don't want, like schedule a LinkedIn post on my company's LinkedIn. Yeah. And then I thought, well, if I'm using generative AI tools to do that, and then other people are using generative AI tools to do the same, the whole social network becomes just posts of generative AI when no one's actually talking to each other, and it becomes really dystopian. So I think we as a society have to figure out, how do we actually combat that? How do we make that information useful to people?
Absolutely.
Two answers I would give to you. So when I started out in AI, I was in the psychology department. And I think there's an analogy with physicists. So if you hang out with physicists, they say they make the universe more beautiful because they explain it. So a flower is more beautiful because the physicist explained how it works to you. And the psychologist would say the same for humans. So by being able to create somehow models of artificial humans, you can really understand what makes a human beautiful. So that's one thing. Then the other thing why it will always be relevant is because the end customers are humans. So, and hopefully for quite a while we'll understand them better than the AI does. So, yes, sorry, there were more questions.
Yes,
so, there's two. Okay, yeah. So there's one there, then Dev afterwards.
What's the one thing that you would do to address those who are digitally excluded from our economy at the moment?
There is no one thing I would do. There's 4 things: access to devices, access to infrastructure, and access to the internet, providing people with the digital skills they need to get online and access local public services, such as using the NHS app, and giving people the motivation and confidence to go online if they haven't been online previously. But also to recognize that some people don't want to be digitally included, and that's okay, but making sure that they have all the options possible will be really crucial. I think local authorities and combined authorities have done a great job in targeting those least privileged communities. I think now the conversation is not only on sort of the widening digital divide, but also how, like, we're splitting into the AI haves and the AI have-nots. And you can see that in the way people might progress over the next couple of years in terms of those who did use, a generative AI tool to spruce up their CV, and those that didn't. So I think that's also really important, because we're all talking about AI, but some people, don't even know how to get onto their email.
I think, just very quickly, one of the best things, I guess, about, what ChatGPT, I guess, did for everybody is, we all know, people who've been in the industry know that we've had AI for a long time. We had AI solutions, but what GPT did, it is actually democratized it to a huge extent. So at this stage, unless somebody is, for whatever reasons, they're, economically not privileged, or they don't have access, as you mentioned, to the actual device, but otherwise it is so democratized that actually literally anybody can learn a lot which they want to, or use any of the tools which are available. So as long as obviously they need to have the economic access, and maybe that's how communities can help.
I would say, if there was one thing for me, it's, again, within the educational context, it's making sure there's equality of access to AI, because what you're seeing is a significant disparity between the capabilities of language models based on cost, and that's going to continue to become the case. And even as an example, I had yesterday, I was working on a particular use case, and I asked one AI because I tend to validate whatever it is, if I'm doing, if it's important, across 3 different AIs, and if they all agree with one another, then I'm happy. And generally they do. So I was, one of them had just been upgraded, and I asked, and these are all premium accounts, and I asked the same question of this one, and it went away, gave me the answer, and then it coded an application, a complete application, and placed it on the right-hand side, just built from scratch, user interface, everything. And you know, and I hadn't even been aware of that update, and that's the extent to which these things. And you know, if you imagine that somebody is on a computing course and they've now got access to this, somebody isn't, then there's a massive disparity.
I agree with all that. It's just that there's always been haves and have-nots, and people now probably have access to more information and more knowledge and more data than they've ever had, even those where there is a digital divide. So completely agree, we've got to address the digital divide, give them access to all the information. I couldn't have answered it any better than that. But let's reflect on the fact that this is an opportunity to give more people access to things that have previously only been for the privileged very few. That's no longer the case.
Dev. So there's a microphone coming down.
There's a few on this side as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah. So, I think Dev was next, maybe. Yeah. Thank you. We need an AI to track the queues. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, panel.
Yeah. Thank
Okay, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we, as a university, produce, generate, create knowledge, and disseminate. That's our core business, if I may say. 5 years from now, the machine learning that we're talking about, the capabilities obviously will be many, many thousand times more. I mean, some of the examples Martin just now gave up, you know, I don't know where it'll reach, so it'll teach itself. So in that context, what do you see the role of universities? And I want to dispense with the question of productivity enhancement, that universities are seen as skilled manpower supplier or human supplier of skilled humans. Because it is going to affect the way we do research, what we research, what we teach, how we teach. And as a university that has taught at distance and embraced technology much ahead of most other universities, so do we see ourselves kind of evolving into the next phase, or do we need to be afraid of something which could actually decimate people like us, saying everybody can do online learning, there will be boutique providers of learning packages and of all kinds. In that context, how do universities, which actually invest so much into knowledge creation, survive? Because skill training will not be financially very lucrative because of the scale that this AI will now enable in terms of cost reduction. So this is a twofold question. How do universities, which primarily do research and teaching, survive in future where teaching will probably be enabled at much lower cost by AI? And what do you see direction of use of this tremendous intellectual capital that university academics have that can contribute to the use of AI for good of society? So we currently offer education as a public good. How do we enhance that public goodness of education when there is a financial challenge on the other side?
Good question. So, Martin, did you have your?
Yeah, I think as someone with kids going through the educational process, the in-person experiences generally is just, I think, the cornerstone of education, and it's critically important to society that that this is preserved. It's in no one's interest for people to spend their entire lives on gadgets, not engaging with people, and it's never been worse than it is now. We made, in terms of designing our products, a conscious decision to ensure that educators were central to the AI experience being received by the students. So I think preserving that, celebrating the strengths of the human engagement in the process and awareness, just ensuring that it doesn't quietly go the way that, one of the things is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it.
Any more? Okay, so I would just add that, well, there's lots of, I mean, I think, I'm biased, you know me, so I would say we have to embrace it, of course. There's this element of teaching people to live in the world of AI, which is different to the world now. And then another sort of slightly minor point is that in a world where a lot of content is generated by AI, human-generated content becomes extremely valuable. So human-generated content from experts. So all of our content and all of our research papers just tripled in value. So
one very quick thing.
sorry.
If I think back just personally, I took a lot from my university education, albeit it being 30 years ago nearly, and not a lot of that was the knowledge I got. Most of it was the learning process. And I think that's the thing, that's secret, that I think we need to. So we actually have the ability to put more knowledge into a learning process and focus on the learning process, I think.
Yeah, again, I'm not from the sort of education industry as it were, but I would just say that I think all students would always need teachers. I mean, even though they have access to the content, and I know that they can probably reason with AI or, kind of inference from AI, but you still need that expert. I mean, we need to make sure that that expert content person is there, and it's not that and I also don't think that there should be fear. I mean, I think it's kind of how you reimagine and how embrace the new sort of role, but also the, and I'm coming from a very unacademic point of view, but from a fiction or a sort of creative point of view, there was all this big problem with all the Society of Authors, because everybody discovered that all their books had actually been ingested by GPT, and there was this issue of copyrights, because should really OpenAI have used all the material which creative people are in human content, and kind of train all its models. So I think those copyright questions should also come up, because an individual, as you said, research papers or what professors are producing, I think that is content which should always have its value.
Okay, Ashley?
Yeah, so I think this relates to some of the previous questions as well, but one of the themes I felt this morning in the talks was about who's making these tools, who's deciding what happens with them. And I think with regard to, we have to live in a world with AI and learn how to live in a world with AI, and things like productivity gains, it's important to ask the question of who's deciding what we use AI for, and B, what do we do with the productivity gains? It's very often, I think, these sorts of things are sold in terms of, we can free up human time to do more human tasks, for associate lecturers to do more pastoral care, etc. But I think a lot of the fear comes from the perception that, yes, that time will be freed up, and then someone will say, well, now we don't need as many associate lecturers. Even though the motivation maybe has been to enable these human tasks, ultimately we come down to, but we could save money. And I just wondered what you think. Essentially, what should we do with the productivity gains? How do we ensure that we use that properly?
Okay. So a big part of what we do is engage with organisations who have got very different requirements about what their commercial objectives are. And we do a lot of work in local government, and we do a lot of work in higher education. In local government, the clients that we're engaged with are desperately trying to avoid going bust. And there are 40 or 50 councils right now who are on the verge of going bust. And when a council goes bust, what happens is the government forces them to borrow money that the residents have to pay back over time, which means all the local taxes go up and they shut all the services down. So it's a bad thing to happen. So in that case, what they're doing is they're converting productivity gain into essentially headcount loss as a way of avoiding going bust. So in the higher education, we deal with institutions who are getting close to that point themselves because of the funding model. Not many, in terms of the engagement, are choosing to convert the productivity gains as a principal objective into savings. Most that we talk to are seeking to convert them into improved experiences and so on. So that's our practical. Those who have no choice tend to. Those who have a choice are not, in our experience.
it's a crucial question, and I think for us, we have to stay close to our purpose, don't we? It's about putting the productivity gains back into the purpose of us as an organisation. And if that is to be able to teach more people who might not otherwise have access to education, then that's where the money goes, and where you spend that pound should be based on purpose, not based on what you were previously doing to try and do that thing. And I think that keeps us sound in terms of why we're here and what we're trying to do.
And I think the productivity challenge is something that policymakers talk about a lot, because the UK has one of the lowest productivity rates in Europe. And in comparison to, say, the French who take a 2-hour lunch, you think, wow, how is that happening? Are they working more effectively? Or should we all take 2-hour lunches, you know? I think the things that you do with the time you've gained, or the productivity you comes back to your point, Dave, all based on your values, but also your own sort of worth. If you want to take a nap, you can.
Okay, we have time for maybe a quickish question. Quickish answers. So this will be the final one, I think.
Professor Luckin earlier mentioned this idea of local lifelong learning hubs. And I thought that was a really interesting sort of tangible example about how to support adult learning and skills development on AI. Now, I know we touched a bit on it on one of the other questions about what would you like to see to deal with the digital divide. But obviously the budget was today, and I was just wondering, if you could have that one policy ask that the government was going to take forward in terms of how are we going to take forward adult learning and skills in the Gen AI sphere, what would that be?
Okay, I have my answer. But
Yeah, I have an answer as well.
go on.
So it's not so much related to kind of the local area of the work, because I think there's so much needs to happen in regards to linking up the local enterprise partnerships, the local skills partnerships, the local skills improvement partnerships, and the growth hubs. So that's already things that are happening in the community that people don't know about. And so I think lifelong learning hubs would be fantastic, but we have to obviously make sure that they don't end up like the previous partnerships. From my side, one policy ask is, how many of you know about the Government Skills Toolkit? It's a website online that signposts to different tools. The OU is on there. We were part of the informal board on that in 2020 when it came about, and it's really good at listing and signposting to different tools for developing AI, cybersecurity, and then they expanded it to include things like accounting and basic digital skills. What they didn't do is anything with it. So now it's a site that sits on the website. It's quite static. They haven't gathered enough data about who's clicking on. These are people who go on the website and who have motivations to learn. Why don't we grab them and continue them on their journey and signpost to other various tools and get them a personalized learning journey for them. So I think there's a lot that we need to do in order to share the good information, share the information that's out there, because I think a lot of people in this room are doing good work.
Mm-hmm.
Just checking. So yeah, I'm very good at asking for money. So if I had a magic wand, the government would fund a large language model dedicated for education with all the curated sources, and make it freely available for all universities. That's what I would do. But I'm not the Chancellor, obviously, as you can tell. So maybe we can, if there's any more answers to that.
No, I think probably just from a business perspective or an enterprise perspective, there's so much being done about the EU Act and all on the regulatory front, and I think UK did start off on that. So I think continue on that efforts, because I think a lot of the questions which came up from the room also relate back to the fact that we really need to bring in all these policies or the guardrails and all the ways we need to implement AI. So I think it's a good thing that the governments in this case, in this instance, almost everywhere in the world have actually been engaged in the policy making, and I think it should be made more active so that it's all done in a more responsible and sustainable manner as well. So
one of the parts of the EU AI Act, I think it was Provision 4 or Article 4, emphasizes AI literacy, and that's the first time I've ever seen any nation or any kind of conglomerate do that. It's going to be difficult for businesses within the EU to actually prove that they're supporting their staff to become AI literate. But hopefully, there are a lot of really good charities that are doing good work that they can leverage.
Okay, so I'm going to close the panel there. Can we thank our panelists, please? Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.